Hi, my name's Andy. Welcome to Really Random Reads. And today I wanted to talk to you about an author who's really big, really well known, and there's lots of videos about her. But I find less so her short stories. And I think her short stories are great. They're terrifying, gothic, unsettling, transgressive. Daphne du Maurier and her short stories. In particular, this edition of them that I've got, Daphne du Maurier Classics of the Macabre, that I found in a charity shop, illustrated by Michael Foreman. So I'm going to start. I tried to do these videos by saying how I came across the book, how I came across the author. I first heard of Daphne du Maurier when my auntie had a copy of Rebecca on her bookshelf when I was a kid, and I did that classic mistake of judging books by covers, and I thought that is a book that is never ever going to appeal to me. Big fat romance novel, the book, physically speaking, it just kind of looked quite stale, and yeah, just thought it wouldn't be for me. Jump ahead in time, somebody told me, Julia Bell actually, who's an author of predominantly sort of young adult fiction, but also writes really good non-fiction essays. She said to me, Blue Lenses, one of the most unsettling stories she's ever read. And from that, I went away and read it and entirely agreed. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today. Before we jump into it, I would say this book, this short story, is also becoming quite a familiar feature on YouTube. The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Gilman. If you enjoyed this, and I'm not going to talk about it so much here, I'm going to link to people who do that better than me. But if you enjoyed this kind of gothic, unsettling, feminist work about patriarchy and all sorts of things, I would hazard what I consider to be a safe bet that you would probably also get a lot out of Daphne du Maurier's short stories. The same if you like Shirley Jackson's short stories like The Lottery. So let me come back to what I was originally doing this video on. This edition in particular of Daphne du Maurier's work, which I found in my local charity shop, where I find most of my books. Daphne du Maurier, English author. She lived, I think it's something like 1909 through until the 1980s. And the story I should start off talking about, which is in this book, is called The Blue Lenses. Let me read you a couple of sentences about what the setup is, the opening of that. So the protagonist, Marda, she's recovering, sorry I have to look down for this, she's recovering in a nursing home after undergoing surgery to restore her vision, which had been impaired by cataracts. As part of the treatment, she's fitted with a temporary pair of blue-tinted lenses to protect her eyes. Everything normal, straightforward so far-ish. However, when she begins to see people around her, she notices a horrifying change. Everyone appears to be an animal's head instead of a human one, with the type of animal seemingly reflecting their personality or inner nature. I don't like usually stories that are heavy-handed on symbolism and things like that. I find it difficult to get into surrealist fiction. And if you're similar, don't be put off by anything I've just said, because you will probably still get lots and lots from this story. So that's the setup. I'm not going to go any more into plot. That story is incredibly unsettling. It's got a brilliant ending. Daphne du Maurier is gifted with endings where they feel like it couldn't have ended any other way, but you also don't see it coming. Highly recommend. Another story that's in this book is Don't Look Now. I'm not very good with technology. I will see if I can put I'll see if I can put the poster of the famous film on this video. You might know it by the story. It's hard to escape it, particularly like horror films. Anyway, look, you probably know the film. So what else to say about it? So the opening of that story is really effective. There's lots of reasons for that, but I suppose if you wanted to look at a story that's really good at dialogue, where the characters aren't saying what they mean. So rubbish dialogue, in my view, is the dialogue where the character is saying exactly how they mean and exactly how they feel. Much more engaging dialogue is where the character might be saying something that if you just look at the words without any of the context would be really positive. But those words and the way the author has put them in a certain context and the way the words are delivered, you can tell the character's sort of like either really pissed off or very sad or something like that. When this story opens, the two characters who are a married couple, they seem happy, but you very soon learn that something majorly wrong has happened. And when you reflect upon their dialogue and how that story opens, you realise, that's what I was picking up on. Those were the waves that I was picking up on. The story is regarded as a classic. So if you know Daphne du Maurier, you probably know her for Rebecca, or you know her for this. I'm in the minority of, I think, one that really doesn't like the ending. And I don't want to give spoilers in this video, and it's hard to talk about why that is. What I will say, and this won't spoil it for you, is, and you might disagree with me here after you've read it, for me it ended on a trope. And some of the problems that you have in fiction around tropes, such as, so sort of like the mystical Negro is a very problematic trope that can be found in a lot of fiction. For me, this story doesn't have that, but it does have a troubling trope that I feel is along similar lines. I'd love to talk more about it, but I don't want to give away what happens in this story, so highly recommend. Another story in here, and actually my favourite story, is one called The Apple Tree. So again, a married couple, and the female character in this, the way Daphne du Maurier writes her, the passive aggressiveness is so incredibly engaging and really gets into your skin and incredibly convincing in there. So the female character is sort of behaving in that way, and the male character, the utter narcissism of the male character is also incredibly convincing and really gets under your skin, and they're both thrown together. Loads of symbolism in this story, as there was in The Blue Lenses, as there was in Don't Look Now, but it never feels on the nose or in your face. There's a brilliant bit, the way the pub is drawn in this, in the characters in the pub, is incredibly convincing. And again, the ending, like she just is masterful with endings. So if you like unsettling fiction, another story that would appeal to you, I'm going to mention two more. The Birds. I keep saying, if you've heard of Daphne du Maurier, you've probably heard of her for this reason. I mean, if you know, you might know all her works for all I know. I made a fool of myself here, because look, The Birds is another one. If you've heard of Daphne du Maurier, The Birds might well be a story that you're familiar with. Maybe you think it's just a Hitchcock film though, and you don't know that it comes from her short story. And to me, the short story in the book is much more satisfying than than the ending in the film. And what came over to me really strongly when I read the story that I didn't get a sense of when I watched the film is, as a story, it really felt to me like a zombie story or a zombie movie or something like that. So yeah, highly recommend. And finally, there's a story in this collection called The Alibi, which is an absolute page turner and doesn't feel at all contrived. So sometimes when you read a book or a story that's described in that way, you can kind of see the mechanisms working behind it. I touched on this a little bit in another video, but with this one, it's a page turner and it feels naturally so. Other things to share with you about it. So themes I noticed in this collection: selfishness, narcissism, and you see them again in this story. And if you happen to have seen, and it's really good, I believe it's called Rillington Place. It's a TV drama with the actor Tim Roth, who got famous through the film Reservoir Dogs in the 90s. But this is an older Tim Roth, and he plays a British serial killer called Christie, who was a horrible man, sort of killing people in the 40s and the 50s. But Tim Roth plays him brilliantly. And when I read this story, The Alibi, I couldn't help but see this kind of Tim Roth type character with his cardigan and his little tie and his slightly deferential manner, but sinister and dark and so much more going on underneath. Would highly recommend that. I'm going to say a little bit now about the actual book itself. Mixed feelings about it, all right? So I got it from the charity shop. And the first thing that hit me was like, the art felt really like a kid's book, and not in a good way. Some kids' books can be brilliant. And in this book, some pictures felt like that for me, and I just couldn't get past them. And I thought, that's a real shame. And don't you know it, now I'm looking for one, I can't actually find it. But like the front cover is kind of a good example of that for me. But then every now and again, I hit on one, like this one, with the birds and the blood and all of that, where I thought, why couldn't they all be like this? Like, that's great. And where the pictures definitely do work, for me at least, really well, that story called The Alibi is about a man, and I'm not giving any plot spoilers here, it's about painting a man who thinks he's great when he isn't, basically, which is something a lot of, what am I trying to say? I've had moments in my life where I feel like I'm good at something and realise very quickly I'm not, so I could kind of relate to that, maybe YouTube videos. But that might not, like, you might look at that and think like, what's he on about? That doesn't look like amazing art to me. In the context of the story though, for me, this one really did work brilliantly, as does, and this won't be, the impact of how unsettling this is won't be evident to you unless you read the story. I said these ones, which for any other intents and purposes, you would just look like and just be like, oh, it's just something somebody's knocked up in a kid's book. So I've unintentionally been very critical in some ways of Michael Foreman's art there. So, hey, maybe this is your sort of taste in drawing. Maybe all of this is, in which case that's fine. Yeah, so those were the thoughts that I wanted to share with you about Daphne du Maurier's Classics of the Macabre. Video's a bit all over the place. I'm really tired today, and I hope I've done it some kind of justice. But look, bottom line, or like takeaway, I guess, is if you're into unsettling fiction, if you like stuff that's transgressive, unsettling, particularly the gothic, if you're not about all-out complete blood and gore, entrails fest, extreme horror, but if you like the Shirley Jackson, the yellow wallpaper type gig, then strongly recommend Daphne du Maurier, and really wouldn't just stop at her novels, wouldn't just sort of like read Rebecca and leave it there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Sorry so garbled. Hope you have a good rest of your day, night, morning, evening, wherever you are.